America's Funniest Home Videos, Sunday night at 8:30 on Pearl.
Beijing. This is Global Watch.
Hello then and welcome to Global Watch on CGTN. I'm Li Dongning in Beijing.
And I'm Xiaocheng, and these are the headlines.
Donald Trump says Tehran must abandon nuclear ambitions to reach a deal as Iran warns of military action if the U.S. continues to seize Iran-linked ships.
Crowds gather in Tehran for a massive rally pledging allegiance to Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi calls for jointly safeguarding global trade and supply chains while meeting with his Australian counterpart, Penny Wong.
And China's tourism sector is expected to get a boost over the upcoming Labor Day holiday.
Now, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has pushed back against Democratic claims that the Trump administration has led America into a quagmire in Iran. And Hegseth faced tough questions from lawmakers during his first testimony to Congress since the war against Iran began on February the 28th. Now, Tony Waterman reports from Washington, D.C.
This has been an incredibly contentious hearing, the first time that the defense secretary has testified since this conflict began more than 2 months ago. And as you'd expect, Democrats have really been grilling Hegseth on whether there was an imminent threat that warranted this attack. President Trump, of course, has claimed that Tehran was just weeks away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. They've also been pressing him on what the conflict has accomplished, given that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, that Iran maintains military capabilities, and that it has not abandoned its nuclear ambitions. Hegseth has been very defiant. He's touted the U.S.'s military successes, and he's really insisting that the U.S. is winning in this war. And he had some very choice words for lawmakers who oppose this conflict.
The biggest challenge, the biggest adversary we face at this point are the reckless, feckless, and defeatist words of congressional Democrats and some Republicans 2 months in, I remind you, 2 months in to a conflict. Lest I remind you, and my generation understands how long we were in Iraq, how long we were in Afghanistan, how long we were in Vietnam.
Hegseth really pushing back against claims that by some Democrats that the situation in the Middle East is becoming a quagmire, that it's developing into a forever war, the exact thing that President Trump promised not to wade into. During this hearing, we also learned that the war so far has cost American taxpayers $25 billion. Well worth it, Hegseth said, to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. One thing he did not give these lawmakers is an answer on how long this will drag on.
And Iran is warning of unprecedented military action if the U.S. continues its naval blockade against the country. Iran's press TV cited a high-ranking security source saying that if U.S. obstinacy and delusions persist and Iran's conditions are rejected, the enemy should expect a different kind of response, one described as akin to maritime banditry. Iran says the restraint shown by its armed forces so far has been intended to give diplomacy a chance. On Wednesday, Iran's Navy commander, Rear Admiral Shahram Irani said the country will confront the enemy with a weapon it is deeply afraid of. His words. In reaction to U.S. seizures of Iranian ships in international waters, Iran's permanent representative to the UN, Amir Saeed Iravani, has called such actions illegal coercion and interference in legal trade.
Meanwhile, large crowds have gathered in central Tehran celebrating an important religious leader while voicing support for Iran's new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei. And the rally comes as a sensitive political and economic time for the country. Sepir Sarami reports from Tehran.
A massive rally held Wednesday in the capital of Iran, with participants gathered along a route stretching from Imam Hussein Square to Azadi Square. The day marks the birthday of the 8th Shia Imam, Imam Reza. From central Tehran, participants are moving through the city along the main rally route. People here say they are showing support for Mujtaba Khamenei, who assumed the role of Iran's supreme leader after his father was killed in Israeli U.S. strikes nearly 2 months ago. We spoke to people here in the crowd.
We are here on the occasion of Imam Reza's birthday, and also to pledge our allegiance to our leader.
I came to pledge allegiance, and I will continue to do so until the end.
The gathering follows an official call for public participation, with people assembling across central parts of the capital. High-ranking officials were also among the crowd.
It is better for them to stop the aggression. They bombed this country and the nation for 40 days, and they could do nothing. It is better for them to accept our conditions and terms in the negotiations, stop the aggression, pay damages, and live their lives. We have nothing to do with them.
Events like this are often closely observed for both public response and the broader political context in which they take place. But economic pressure is also mounting, and many experts say Iranian officials should also be focused on ways to alleviate the war's impact on inflation. Sepir Sarami, Cgtn, Tehran.
And European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warns that the consequences of the Middle East conflicts could last for years. She is calling for ceasefires in Iran and Lebanon to hold and says the EU must move faster toward energy independence. She adds that during the conflict, the U.S.'s fossil fuel import bill increased by more than 27 billion euros. William Denslow reports from Brussels.
Ursula von der Leyen said that this is the second energy crisis in just 4 years, the last being after Russia's full-scale invasion, which sparked the European Union to pivot away from Russian energy.
Our over-dependency on imported fossil fuels makes us vulnerable. So the way forward is obvious. We must reduce our over-dependency on imported fossil fuels, and we must boost our homegrown, affordable, clean energy supply, from renewables to nuclear, in full respect of technology neutrality.
Now, she says that the EU is in a better place than it was 4 years ago, but still plenty of lessons from the last crisis need to be heeded to this time around. Now, what that looks like, she says, more coordination when it comes to procuring gas, liquefied natural gas, as well as things like jet fuel. She says that the bloc is stronger if it gets these critical things as a bloc rather than individual member states trying to procure on their own. She also said more needs to be done to protect consumers. This comes as the European Commission has vowed to subsidise, especially those in farming, those in the fisheries industry, as well as those working on the roads, those essentially vulnerable to these price changes. She also said that a reduction in demand is vital. More needs to be done to modernise. That can be through electrification or through greater efficiencies.
And the United Arab Emirates is likely to boost oil production after leaving OPEC on May the 1st. And that could mean slightly lower oil prices, even as Iran-related shipment disruptions continue to dominate the market. Johannes Pleshberger reports from Vienna, where OPEC is headquartered.
OPEC is losing one of its most important members. The United Arab Emirates have been a compliant member for many years, possessing one of the greatest spare capacities within the world's largest group of oil producers. In other words, it was the second most important swing producer capable of increasing production to help ease prices. Now, without the UAE, OPEC has less influence on global oil supply, as much of its former spare capacity will likely be released onto the market in the near future.
Well, the UAE, first of all, will increase their production from currently 3.4 million to 5 million barrels. That is a nice income for them. That has been a struggling point for the last couple of years already. But they also will lose importance. OPEC is not only a group that is sharing same interest, they're also a research organization. They're a group where similar ministers of similar countries are meeting and exchanging their ideas. And, well, the UAE won't be part of it.
Meanwhile, OPEC Plus members Russia and Kazakhstan said they will not follow the UAE and leave the organization, while reaffirming their support, which does not come as a surprise, as their interests have been more closely aligned with OPEC than those of the UAE. Abu Dhabi, meanwhile, is reassessing its role and contributions across multilateral organizations, but is not considering any further withdrawals at this time. The announcement comes after some speculation that the UAE could exit other regional groups, like the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab League. Having come under attack during the Iran war, the UAE has distanced itself from fellow Gulf countries while strengthening its relationships with the United States and Israel. Johannes Blechberger, Cgtn, Vienna.
All right, now for more analysis into this, we're joined by Mr. Liu Baocheng, Dean of Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics. Professor Liu, welcome to Global Watch, as always. And a Pentagon, as we learned, a Pentagon official has put the cost of Iran war at $25 billion. And U.S. gas prices have reached its 4-year high. And now, bear in mind, with the midterm elections approaching, do you think the Trump administration is facing tremendous pressure here from all that?
Yes, I think now by reflection of the past few days of operation, both in terms of the hot fire and ceasefire, it seems that the White House has totally underestimated both the pressure in the Gulf Coast area and also, more importantly, of their domestic economic and the political response. Now with the war that is dredging on, with the roller coaster type of fashion, now the U.S. people are not really prepared. And so, therefore, with the rising cost over the multi-year high at the gas pump, and people do feel the pinch. And then they do not even know how this cycle can really stretch on. So that the economic considerations with pressure on the household expenditure is beginning more and more translating into the political pressure, and particularly now during the election cycle, the Democrats are also taking advantage of such a sort of a situation to launch attacks over the Republicans. So now the Trump administration is really stuck in a dilemma. If they pull out, they show a weakness that is also being attacked by the other parties. And if they move on, they cannot give a definite answer in terms of the cost and benefit to its own constituencies. So right now, plus there are many other stakeholders are really having different type of response that is really beyond the expectation of Donald Trump. So now the dilemma can really still be going on, and people will have to see and watch what is going to what are going to be the next steps that they are going to take, and how the response of the global community can really reshape the situation over the tension in the Gulf area.
Well, Professor Liu, the U.S. says it will expand its naval blockade of Iranian ports. Of course, Iran vows a strong response there. It seems that the Strait of Hormuz might remain closed for nobody knows how long. So are there any alternative, shipping routes? Because that's very important for the global energy supplies here.
Yes, I think now the U.S. has totally underestimated the resilience of the Iran's warfare response, and now by blocking the Strait of Hormuz, that's created a big disruption across the globe, particularly in terms of the energy supply, because Hormuz is really the passage for over 20% of the global energy, and now many other countries are really facing the difficulties in having such sort of access. So in terms of alternatives, there are also, land pipelines, connecting with Saudi Arabia, with the UAE, but that's not enough. And more of the sea routes are also being forced to have found some of the alternatives, either via the Red Sea or even going through the coast of the African continents. But these are really the temporary alternatives can only serve as a buffer. They cannot really, totally substitute the access. So, as you mentioned, that when there is indefinity in terms of such a blockade, many other countries are really in a state of anxiety rather than really find strategic alternatives. And of course, the immediate reaction would, to reduce the energy consumption, to boost the energy efficiency. So that could be the choice. So right now, there are not really a comprehensive and strategic solution towards such a sort of situation.
Right, and Professor, since you mentioned the efficiency of energy, that's something we need very much right now because of the surging oil price. And the EU's von der Leyen is calling for energy independence amid ongoing conflict. Energy independence, in reality, does that even exist and achievable?
Well, I do not think they can really achieve full autonomy and full sufficiency on their own. But what they are seeing is really one is to follow their strategy of diversification of their energy supply, and more importantly, towards their commitment to climate change by reducing the carbon footprint. But if you look at the situation that is going on in Europe, they are still, highly dependent on the gas supply and many of the fossil-based energy. So transition is not really there to take place overnight. So in that sense, they can continue to find alternative supplies in terms of particularly LNG, and then, to reduce the energy consumption by working with more of the global partners, particularly with China, because China is really the manufacturing hub. Much of the energy is really cost here, so that we are able to supply more of the solar energies, batteries, and particularly if they can really consider to open larger access and reduce some of the non-tariff barriers for Chinese e-vehicles. So that could be also a very important solution. So anyhow, I think the diversification of trade supply and also reducing the cost, and also to mediate in order to reduce the tension over the Middle East. So that could be the job they can really possibly do.
So diversification and resilience are very, very key words here. Thank you very much, Mr. Liu Baocheng from University of International Business and Economics. Thank you very much for your insight.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says he has discussed a possible Ukraine ceasefire in a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
We talked about Ukraine. And I talked a little bit about Iran. I talked about a few different subjects, mostly about Ukraine. And we had a very good conversation. I think we're going to come up with a solution relatively quickly, I hope.
What does he want?
I think he'd like to see a solution, I can tell you, and that's good.
A Russian presidential aide says Putin informed Trump of Russia's readiness to declare a truce for the period of Victory Day commemorations next month. Trump voiced strong support for the initiative. The aide says the conversation between the two presidents lasted over an hour and a half. Putin also told Trump that a ground operation on Iranian territory would be completely unacceptable. He put forward ideas on resolving the conflict over Iran's nuclear program.
Vladimir Putin
views Donald Trump's decision to extend the ceasefire with Iran as a correct step that should provide an opportunity for negotiations and help stabilize the situation on the whole. At the same time, the Russian president drew attention to the inevitable and extremely dire consequences, not only for Iran and its neighbors, but for the entire international community should the U.S. and Israel once again resort to military action. Furthermore, the option of a ground operation on Iranian territory is viewed as entirely unacceptable and dangerous.
You're now watching Global Watch on CGTN. Still ahead. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi calls for jointly safeguarding global trade and supply chains while meeting with his Australian counterpart, Penny Wong.
And Japan's military expansion and constitutional revision face growing public criticism at a war exhibition in Yokohama.
Images,
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says that China and Australia should stand together on the right side of history and uphold multilateralism. The two nations should jointly maintain the global free trade system alongside stable and unimpeded industrial and supply chains. Wang Yi made the remarks during the 8th China-Australia Diplomatic and Strategic Dialogue held in Beijing with Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong. And he noted that both sides should deepen mutual understanding and urged Australia to protect the safety and legitimate rights and the interests of Chinese citizens and personnel. And Wang also offered an in-depth explanation of China's position regarding the Taiwan question. Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong reaffirmed Australia's commitment to the One China policy opposition to Taiwan independence and hope for a peaceful resolution of the Taiwan question. And Wong added that Canberra is willing to work with China to safeguard international rules and ensure energy security.
And China will extend zero tariff treatment to all African countries that it diplomatic ties with, starting May the 1st. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ling Jian says the initiative reflects China's commitment to high-level openness and its principles of sincerity toward Africa.
Zero tariffs will serve as a golden key to trade prosperity, an accelerator for industrial investment, a timely rainfall to address challenges, and a bridge that connects China-Africa friendship. The treatment will bring more high-quality African products to Chinese households, enhance the sense of accomplishment and happiness for both peoples, and help Chinese enterprises to invest in Africa. The treatment will create opportunities for industrial upgrades and boost Africa's self-development capacity.
And a South African official says China's zero-tariff policy could help Africa break free from what it calls the raw material export trap and move into the processing link of the green supply chain.
Well, zero tariffs will certainly enhance trade. And, we want to thank the leadership of your country for having the foresight to bring about the zero tariffs. Because if you look at what is coming from the West, the high tariffs that are being imposed, that is causing trade relations to be strained. Now, when you have a country like China that says zero tariffs, that actually encourages trade between the various countries.
An exhibition on Japan's aggression against China in World War II has recently opened in the city of Yokohama. Visitors have criticized Japan's recent moves to expand the military and revise the pacifist constitution.
It is extremely important to pass historical facts down to the next generation. History is continuous. The present exists precisely because of the past. Vital historical facts concerning the Japanese Army's war crimes, including the Nanjing Massacre, forced labor, and comfort women, are being continuously erased by the Japanese government, which is deeply concerning.
Seeing that Japan seems to be edging toward the brink of danger once again, we feel it is even more necessary to re-examine history.
Some seek to revise the Constitution to make it possible to wage war. Such attempts must be firmly stopped. I oppose constitutional revision.
Japan's recent moves have also drawn criticism from Russia. Moscow stresses that the crimes against humanity committed by Japan in the Second World War are not subject to any statute of limitations, and investigations into these atrocities will continue. It also urges Japan to reflect on its history and abandon its militarization push.
Many of the Japanese militarists fled to Tokyo. They were later held accountable, and additional trials were conducted against those who had escaped to Tokyo. We have spoken before about that extensive and somber chapter of history. For instance, Shiro Ishii led the notorious Unit 731. He personally planned, directed, and carried out inhumane experiments on people. First, we must acknowledge history. Second, there is no statute of limitations for crimes against humanity committed during World War II. Efforts to investigate these crimes will continue.
And activists from various civic groups across the Republic of Korea have also taken to the streets outside the Japanese embassy in central Seoul, and they are demanding that Japan faces history and issue a genuine apology. And they also called for international unity and vigilance against the revival of Japanese militarism.
법적 배상을 이행하라! 진실된 역사를 교육하라!
The international community should make it clear that Japan's militarism is threatening the stability of Northeast Asia only by raising our voices for peace, not by strengthening military cooperation. Can we curb Japan's ambition to rearm and prevent any future war?
Japan has not reflected on its past, nor has it adopted a responsible attitude. On the contrary, it has gone out of its way to prevent the installation of statues symbolizing the sex slaves. This is a country that now seeks to become a nation capable of waging war again. That is undoubtedly a threat to peace in Northeast Asia.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, fierce fighting has erupted between Congolese forces and the M23 rebels in the east, despite a ceasefire there. Authorities in Kinshasa accused the rebels and neighboring Rwanda of launching attacks against their troop positions in South and North Kivu provinces. Rwanda has repeatedly denied any involvement. Chris Ochemringa reports from Kinshasa.
A war with no immediate end in sight. The DRC army, backed by the Wazalendo militia, has continued fighting the M23 rebels who are reportedly backed by Rwanda. The renewed clashes come 2 weeks after representatives of the DRC government and the M23 rebels met in Switzerland and signed a deal to monitor a ceasefire, release prisoners, and allow humanitarian access. Security analysts fear the latest round of fighting could derail the peace efforts.
Ces mesures sont ce qu'on appelle les mesures de confiance.
The measures they agreed to observe in Switzerland are known as confidence-building measures. Unfortunately, neither the DRC nor the M23 rebels have observed any of them until now. So given the current situation, it is difficult for them to advance to the next level of talks.
The US, Qatar, and the African Union are pushing for a peaceful resolution to the long-running conflict, but the warring parties have continued fighting. The DRC army recently said it shot down a drone belonging to Rwanda, which it accuses of backing the M23 rebels. The M23 rebels denied the claim and blamed the DRC army for attacking their positions first. The DRC's allied militia is now calling on the government to build a strong army to secure all its borders.
We have to go with diplomacy. This is okay. I'm okay with diplomacy. But first and foremost, we should have a DRC strong, led by its people, by Congolese people, by patriots. This is one of solutions. If we don't have such a solution, then we'll have a weak DRC where if it's not Rwanda, it will be Angola. If it's not Angola, it will be Uganda. If it's not Uganda, it will be a country which will understand that they can serve themselves.
The renewed fighting has claimed hundreds of lives and displaced thousands of people in eastern DRC. The ongoing conflict in the east of the DRC has left many Congolese in despair. Hundreds of them had high hopes that the mediation efforts by the US and Qatar would bring the war to a quick end, but it has dragged on, claiming the lives of their loved ones amidst accusations and counter-accusations by the warring parties about who is at fault. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
All right, you're now watching Global Watch on CGTN. Still ahead. China adopts a law on social assistance to build a stronger safety net for vulnerable groups.
And U.S. Federal Reserve Chair nominee Kevin Warsh clears a key procedural hurdle, advancing to a Senate confirmation vote.
China's top legislature has adopted a new law on social assistance aiming to provide more accessible and efficient support to vulnerable groups across the country. And the law will take effect on July the 1st, 2026. It comes as the 14th National People's Congress, or NPC, wrapped up its latest standing committee session in Beijing on Thursday. And during that three-day session, lawmakers also reviewed several draft laws, underscoring a continued focus on improving people's livelihoods. Now, Hong Yue tells us more.
After about 3 decades of legislative efforts, China has adopted a new law on social assistance. The law aims at strengthening basic living support and building a more comprehensive safety net for vulnerable groups. It includes measures to streamline administrative procedures, making it easier for people in need to apply for and receive assistance. It also encourages governments at all levels to support able-bodied recipients in becoming self-reliant and overcoming difficulties. An expert who has long been involved in the legislative process says the move marks a milestone in China's social security system.
In the past, social assistance mainly focused on those in extreme hardship.
Now it has been expanded to include more vulnerable groups who need essential support. We are also moving beyond purely material aid to include services. This means the safety net is becoming more comprehensive and better able to meet people's needs.
The law also comes at a time when China is shifting from targeted poverty alleviation to a long-term mechanism aimed at preventing people from slipping back into poverty. The expert says the new law is crucial, especially for those unable to work.
For people who are unable to work, such as those with disabilities, a sound social assistance system is essential. With such a safety net in place, they are less likely to fall into severe hardship.
Meanwhile, lawmakers also reviewed a draft law on healthcare security during the session. The draft proposes establishing a more comprehensive, multi-layered healthcare security system. It also emphasizes better coordination among healthcare services, medical insurance, and pharmaceuticals to improve overall governance and efficiency.
A healthcare security law is key to achieving universal health coverage. It aims to address gaps identified in past reforms and build a more complete and coordinated system that benefits the entire population.
The draft's provisions on improving maternity insurance and expanding its coverage have drawn public attention. This comes as China moves to build a more birth-friendly society in response to demographic challenges.
This mainly supports people during their childbearing years, covering services such as prenatal care and childbirth-related expenses. Including these in the broader medical insurance system will help make support more accessible and encourage childbirth.
Beyond individual provisions, these draft laws point to a broader shift in China's legislative approach, placing more emphasis on investing in people's well-being. For those in distress, it means greater dignity. For those planning to have children, it means more confidence. The focus is to make a social safety net that is more inclusive, responsive, and sustainable. Huang Yue, Cgtn, Beijing.
Right now, you're watching Global Watch on CGTN. Here's our Michael Wang joining us with the latest business headlines. Michael?
Well, hi there, Dongling. China's factory activity remained stable for the month of April. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index came in at a reading of 50.3. That is a slight dip of 0.1 percentage points compared to the previous month, but still in expansion territory. Meanwhile, the PMI for China's non-manufacturing sector fell into contraction territory at 49.4 in April. Also, a private PMI survey by Rating Dog and S&P Global, which takes the pulse of more medium and smaller-sized private factories, compared to the official PMI, showed manufacturing PMI in April at 52.2. That is up 1.4 percentage points compared to the previous month, and also marking a fifth consecutive month of expansion. Well, China has formally blocked the proposed $2 billion acquisition of Chinese-founded AI startup Manus by U.S. tech giant Meta. It cited national security risks tied to data, technology, and cross-border capital flows. Our reporter Liu Jiaxin has more.
A blocked deal, a relocated startup, and a clear signal from Beijing. Meta's bid for Manus is officially off. But this isn't just about one attempted tech takeover, but about how China draws its security lines. The decision, announced on April 27 by China's Foreign Investment Security Review Office under the National Development and Reform Commission, ordered the parties to unwind the deal. The ruling offers a rare but telling look into how Beijing is applying its foreign investment screening rules to the AI sector.
In Manus's case, much of its early R&D was conducted in China, and its core technical team consisted of Chinese engineers. These features mean that the movement of people, control over technology, and data flows are inherently connected to China's interests, creating a clear basis for security scrutiny.
Manus made waves in the industry when it launched its AI agent, a system that can act autonomously on the user's behalf, in March last year. But just months later, the company moved its headquarters to Singapore, cut most of its China-based workforce, and stopped serving users in the country. By December 2025, Manus announced the plans to be sold to the American tech giant Meta for around $2 billion. Executives of the startup had joined the American tech giant soon after. Mainers tried to cut ties with China before the sale, but regulators looked at where its tech and people came from. Well, here's the key. Similar reviews happen in other places as well.
其实这些审查在欧美之间也经常发生。
Similar patterns exist in the US and UK. The US scrutinized ByteDance's acquisition of Musical.ly, later TikTok, over concerns about US user data and algorithmic control long after the deal closed. In the UK, the proposed acquisition of ARM triggered security concerns regarding core IP and defense autonomy, leading the buyer to withdraw during deeper review.
China's 15th five-year plan emphasizes high-level opening up. Experts say that openness and security are not contradictory. A rigorous national security review does not deter foreign investment. They also recommend adding foundational AI technologies to the investment review catalog, making advanced filings mandatory rather than intervening retroactively. 刘嘉欣 Cgtn 北京。
And Kevin Warsh, U.S. President Donald Trump's pick to lead the Federal Reserve, has now cleared a key procedural hurdle, opening a path for him to succeed Jerome Powell starting next month. The U.S. Senate Banking Committee voted 13-11 along party lines to advance Mr. Warsh's nomination to the full Republican-controlled Senate. Powell says he will remain on the Fed's Board of Governors, citing concerns about preserving the central bank's independence. Our Owen Fairclough has more from Washington.
At the end of an era for the U.S. central bank, more of the same for now. The Federal Reserve holding its main interest rate amid fears over the economic impact of the conflict with Iran.
In the near term, higher energy prices will push up overall inflation.
Inflation was already higher than the Fed's 2% target. Holding the rate is aimed at tempering economic activity, even if it means the cost of mortgages or borrowing to grow a business remain elevated. But outgoing Chair Jerome Powell, whose second term ends on the 15th of May, didn't hold back on the other big challenge facing the Fed.
It is extremely important, not for the people who work at the Fed at any given time, but for the people that we serve, that the Fed remain able to conduct monetary policy in a way that doesn't get pulled into politics.
Powell's decision to maintain that interest rate is for some a last act of defiance against US President Donald Trump.
Few tenures at the head of the US central bank have been quite so overshadowed by one president as Jerome Powell's, at least in the modern era. Trump picked Powell to run the Fed in his first presidency, but quickly turned on him when Powell initially resisted Trump's demands to cut that main interest rate. Trump stood to benefit politically from a short-term bump in economic growth. So Powell steps down as chair of the Fed, having defended the Fed's independence. But there are persistent questions about this organization's ability to stay out of politics.
Especially as Trump expects his nominee, current Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, to cut that rate once lawmakers vote to approve him to replace Powell.
He certainly wants to cut rates. I've been watching him for a long time.
Warsh has favored a rate cut, but said at his nomination hearing he will act independently and hasn't been pressured by Trump.
The president never asked me to commit to interest rate cuts at any particular meeting over the period of my tenure at the Fed.
As he steps down, Powell is also overturning convention, remaining on the Fed's Board of Governors who vote on interest rate decisions. Fed chairs typically leave the organization, and Powell admitted his decision was aimed at guarding the Fed's independence.
I'm not looking to be, a high-profile dissident or anything like that. I'm more looking at the other aspects of this and wanting to see that things have calmed down and we're returning to a traditional model.
Owen Fairclough, Cgtn, Washington.
All right, moving now to the latest U.S. big tech earnings in the first quarter of 2026, where Amazon reports its net sales are rising 17% on year to $181.5 billion US dollars. It says the increase was helped by surging growth in its prominent cloud computing unit. Meanwhile, Microsoft saying its 2026 fiscal year Q3 revenue increased by 18%, reaching nearly $83 billion. The company's financial report shows a quarterly net income of nearly $32 billion. That is up more than 23%. And U.S. social media giant Meta reporting its Q1 revenue reaching $56.3 billion, an increase of 33% year on year. The company's quarterly net income rose to $26.77 billion. That is up 61% compared to a year earlier. All right, that is going to do it from my end for now. Dong-Ning, it is back to you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for all the business updates of the day. And you're now watching Global Watch. China's tourism sector is expected to get a boost over the upcoming Labor Day holiday observed from May the 1st to the 5th. And the national railway network is expected to handle 158 million passenger trips over the period. An average of around 12,000 passenger trains will run every day. And May the 1st will see the travel peak with an estimated 24 million passenger trips. Several activities will be held across China to celebrate the holiday. In the Yibin city of southwest China's Sichuan province, a Miao ethnic folk parade has kicked off, featuring various intangible cultural heritage experiences. And in East China's Anhui province, Mount Huangshan attracts tourists with its spring scenery and cultural experiences. And Menghua City scenic area in Fujian province brings history to life through immersive live performances.
And a major film-themed tourism campaign is lighting up central China's cultural scene ahead of the May Day holiday. The Travel with Movies promotional event is being held in Changsha, capital of Hunan province. It features a spectacular visual show at the Meixi Lake International Culture and Arts Center. Here's the story.
The event in Changsha aims to energize both the holiday box office and tourism consumption by blending cinema with travel experiences. At the heart of the event is the world's largest projection multimedia dome, which debuted the campaign's themed poster in a stunning display of light and shadow. The dome, a newly introduced attraction of Changsha, combines cutting-edge projection technology with artistic design. Featuring ultra-high-definition visuals both inside and outside the sphere, it offers an immersive viewing environment. Industry insiders say the venue also holds strong potential for film premieres and promotional events, creating new opportunities for marketing and audience engagement.
I came from Nantong City for a trip here. It's my first time here, and I find it really stunning. It feels like you are rising up into the air. It's very immersive, almost as if you are floating.
As for films, I think today's creativity is much better in every aspect than before. Visually, it's very different from the past. The perspectives are definitely new. I'm still very willing to go to the cinema to watch the latest films, whether they're emotional stories, animations, or martial arts films.
The campaign is not only enriching holiday tourism offerings, but also deepening the integration of film and cultural travel. By positioning Meixi Lake as a gateway destination, the event encourages visitors to explore Changsha and beyond, injecting new momentum into the high-quality development of Hunan's cultural tourism sector. As the May Day holiday approaches, organizers are inviting travelers to follow the magic of cinema, discovering the vibrant city life of Changsha and the scenic beauty of Hunan through a new, immersive film plus tourism experience. Ding Xiyue, CGTN.
Well, the Beijing Auto Show 2026 is in full swing, and the key message from this year's event is quite clear. Cars are evolving into computers on wheels. A physical AI, the kind that drives, walks, and thinks, is moving from the cloud into the vehicle itself. And from humanoid robots sharing chips with cars to level 3 autonomous driving at 200,000 yuan, and the transformation is accelerating. Our reporter Li Mengyuan has 3 takeaways from day one.
2 years ago at this show, brands were still asking what AI can do for cars. But today the question is what cars can do for AI. So it's not the future of driving, it's the future of intelligence with wheels attached. First, the car is becoming a robot. Humanoid robots on the show floor share the same AI brain as the vehicles parked next to them. Same chips, same models, and same physical intelligence. The transformation starts this form. The car is no longer a tool to drive. It's an intelligent agent that moves on its own. Second, the brain is moving inside the machine. Level 3 autonomous driving is now standard on vehicles in the 200 to 300,000 yuan range. No longer a luxury, just a feature. Onboard language models are running entirely inside the vehicle. So your data stays in the car and the intelligence doesn't need an internet signal. New end-to-end AI architectures are replacing the old sense plan act pipeline with a single neural network that goes straight from perception to action. The product is no longer the car, it's the intelligence inside it. Smart driving used to be a premium add-on, and now it's the baseline for a mass market vehicle. Next generation chip platforms on this floor are hitting 3,000 TOPS, the kind of computing power that was the ceiling for an entire vehicle just 2 years ago, and now packed into a single system. So the business model shifts from selling cars to selling mouths and even selling agents nowadays. And the revenue stream is opening up. China has the scale, the data, and supply chain to lead that shift. And the rest of the world is watching where the value moves. Walk through these doors and one word hits you: physical AI, the kind that drives, walks, and flies. The show isn't about horsepower, it's about brain power. And the car is becoming the computer. China is writing the code. Li Mengyuan, Cgtn, Beijing.
All right, you're now watching Global Watch on Cgtn. Straight ahead. As traditional Chinese medicine gains global recognition, more international students study the practice in China. Traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, has spread to 196 countries across the world already. More than 100 TCM drugs have obtained registration in countries involved in the Belt and Road Initiative. And acupuncture is now recognized in 113 World Health Organization member states. And the TCM Technology Committee under the International Organization for Standardization has issued 119 TCM-related standards. And China has signed TCM cooperation agreement with more than 40 foreign states and international organizations. It also set up 30 high-quality overseas TCM centers, and TCM cooperation has been included in 16 free trade agreements.
As TCM gains global recognition, more international students are coming to China to study it. One student shares her understanding of Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture.
Do the herbs, we do the tuina, the acupuncture, a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
what do you think you're most passionate about? Like something that really attracted you? Like, I see a difference in this.
Well, something that I love the most is the herbs, because I like in my country, like we also use a lot of like herbal medicine, and I just think that plants are amazing. They can cure you. They can. I mean, you need to be careful with them, of course. Like I really like the plant medicine, but also studying. Like I found out about acupuncture and cupping, and now every time that I go like for holidays back home to Serbia, like everybody is coming to my house like, please give me acupuncture, please give me cupping. Yeah, so I feel like the cupping and the acupuncture, tuina is more useful abroad, but also the herbs maybe in the future can be like. But also one more thing that I like is the way that Chinese medicine like distinguishes the herbs like by the 5 elements and cold and hot and everything. And I wish maybe someday in the future to organize the traditional herbs of like European, like Balkan region in the Chinese traditional way.
Now, U.S. federal panel has voted unanimously to exempt oil and gas drillers in the Gulf of Mexico from a law meant to protect endangered species. And this decision puts one of the world's rarest whales at immediate risk. And the Rice's whale now faces a future without the legal guardrails that have protected endangered wildlife. Lisa Soledad Perez reports from Florida.
The Rice's whale, discovered in 2021, is found only in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. The estimated population is about 50. Scientists are learning how it feeds and migrates. A species barely known to science, now on a razor's edge because of a decision made by high-ranking U.S. officials.
It is essential to our national security to exempt all Gulf oil and gas activities from the Endangered Species Act requirements.
Last month, the Endangered Species Committee, commonly called the God Squad, voted unanimously to waive protections for all Gulf of Mexico oil and gas drilling. The cabinet-level panel can grant blanket exemptions, removing the legal requirements that normally force companies to avoid or mitigate harm to endangered species. The vote took under 20 minutes. The consequences could last decades.
I think it's important to consider when you're talking about endangered species, that's what we're talking about here, they're endangered for a reason. It's because there are a lot of pressures on them, their habitat is degraded, compressed, and any additional stress can be detrimental to species like that.
The Gulf of Mexico has seen catastrophic spills before. The 2010 Deepwater Horizon disaster overlapped with nearly half of the Rice's whale's habitat and is estimated to have lowered the population by 22%. Scientists say oil doesn't just coat animals. It causes hidden damage that quietly reduces survival and reproduction for years after.
Many of these impacts will not be seen if you're just looking at the individual animal. For example, in the lab or in captivity, they seem fine, but they are impaired. And those impairments we've shown for wild animals lead to increased mortality and reduced spawning in the wild. And so that will have cascading effects to the entire ecosystem, including impacts on endangered species in their ecosystem.
The waiver took effect April 3rd. Weeks later, a pipeline rupture sent crude oil spreading more than 600 kilometers across the Gulf, contaminating 6 species and 7 protected reserves. A stark reminder of the risks that now face a body of water where U.S. companies are no longer legally required to protect endangered species while operating.
People from all over the world come down to Florida to visit, to go snorkeling, to go scuba diving, to experience lobster and crabs at like local restaurants. And when there is a consequence of an oil spill, you don't recognize how that's going to affect you as a tourist. You can't go to a restaurant, you can't eat crab and lobsters anymore because the recreational fishermen can't catch those anymore. And so I think that recognizing around the world that when an oil spill occurs or when there is drilling occurring right in your backyard, it actually affects everyone around the world.
At least 5 federal lawsuits have been filed by Earth Justice, the Sierra Club, Defenders of Wildlife, and others. Plaintiffs say the national security rationale is illegally unsupported and are asking courts to restore protections while the decision is reviewed. Legal experts say the national security provision was never designed to exempt an entire industry across an entire body of water.
Just respect the balance between exploiting a resource and preserving that resource, because if you're not preserving the resource, it's not going to persist and you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
The Rice's whale has one home, one ocean, and as of this month, 0 legal protections. The next few months will determine if this species and many others in the Gulf will have a future. Lisa Soledad Perez, Cgtn, Key Largo, Florida.
All right, that's it for this edition of Global Watch on CGTN. I'm Li Dongning in Beijing.
And I'm Xia Cheng. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.